everyone. This is Louis Ozoria, part of Cortina Brass. I'm here with my partner in crime, Dillon Parker, also a trumpet player in Cortina Brass. We're just going to be talking about doubling the trumpets. So having two trumpet players within a group and how we kind of navigate that, specifically within our ensemble.
So basically there's two roles in the brass quintet in terms of trumpet. The roles are fairly flexible, but there are some general ground rules you can have for each one. Primarily in this group, I play a lot of first trumpet, and the focus when you're playing first trumpet, whether really you're in a chamber group or a larger group, is to make sure that you're in tune with yourself melodically. And even if you're a good sport and you're used to collaborating and tuning with other people, to some degree, you have to resist the urge to adjust to the inner voices if they're not the leading melodic content. And I'm playing more section trumpet, like in my master's degree, than I did first trumpet a lot of the time. So that was a bit of an adjustment for me coming into my doctorate and playing more first trumpet in both quintet and orchestras. So I think that's important to know. And another thing to consider is that in terms of leading with the melody, you do have to make sure that you're projecting and producing enough volume. And I would say it's generally easier to pull back than it is to try to give more. So make sure that you're in a mindset where you can play really confidently and fully. Hesitation is sort of the enemy when you're playing first trumpet. So just developing that confidence and that fullness of your sound is going to be really important for playing first trumpet. And that really applies to chamber and other settings as well.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. My role typically falls under playing more second trumpet in this group. And it's a different bag of tricks. When you're playing second, you have to consider that your part is just important, but in different ways. And one of the first things I have to do is kind of acknowledge that we are playing as a section, but he primarily has the voice above me. So your ego kind of has to be checked out. And there's a couple different things that you have to consider when you're doing that. One of the things to consider is focusing on tuning. And kind of having a balance between, we're playing in a bigger ensemble, whether it's 5 or 6 people, we are listening to the rest of the group and tuning between the group, but I'm also tuning a lot specifically to make sure what Dillon's playing works with the rest of the group. And thinking about the consideration of where my part sits between him and everybody else within a chord. A couple other things is having the balance as a second player to be comfortable enough to acknowledge the part I'm playing and to know my responsibilities and to kind of free myself from the restrictions of playing the content to get into balancing the finer parts of my role. So really listening to the details that Dillon's putting in the music or the first trumpet player in general, whether that's articulation and matching that, trying to sound like almost, two trumpets being played by one person, and quality of sound, different dynamics that we're working on, and really trying to balance me listening to him and syncing up with that, and then kind of tying that into playing with the group in general. And then just in general, I try to think about the fact that when you and I play together, I don't want you to be worried about what I'm playing. I want you to be thinking about how free you're feeling because of the support I'm giving to you and what I'm playing. So that's kind of the process that I go through as a second player when I sit in that chair, and I'm trying to specifically support the first playing, because I know that when the tables then turn, I want that support for myself.
And the tables will turn. To kind of put a bow on it, one piece that we played on our last recital was Suite Americana by Enrique Crespo, and there are a lot of times where the second trumpet is explicitly filling the first trumpet role. So we both need to be prepared to do each task when the time is right.
Yeah, it does come with the concept of just because you're a second player doesn't mean you can hide. You need to have the technical facility, you need to have the musical capabilities to shine up when it's your time to kind of come up on stage in the spotlight, and then understand that it's not even necessarily the title of the part you're playing. It switches so quickly. And I think that's something we definitely prioritize in our music to balance each other.
Yeah. So in terms of making decisions on who's playing lead on a particular piece, like we were saying, typically I'm playing first trumpet, but just for the consideration of endurance, mainly, but also just to kind of make things equitable, we will switch off on lead parts. And one of the things we kind of do to decide how we're going to do that is sort of weighing the strengths of each player. So, for example, if there's a part with flugelhorn playing, I'm going to think of Lewis as having that part. He's spent a lot more time on the flugelhorn, and his sound is just gorgeous on that instrument. So we're going to cater to that strength. On the other hand, if there's a lot of piccolo trumpet, that's probably going to be my part because I've owned a piccolo trumpet a little bit longer. It's a new purchase for Lewis.
Yeah, it's a pretty green.
I'm still figuring out piccolo trumpet after all these years. It can be a very squirrely little thing. And then I guess the other thing is, in terms of the weight of the repertoire, the lead player might give out some parts to second trumpet, but you also don't want to make it excessively taxing for them either, and in an unfair sort of way, in a Beethoven 7 sort of way where it's never sky high, but it just lingers forever. We want to make sure you balance that stuff evenly too, and that you don't throw all of that kind of thing at second trumpet either.
Yeah, I would say we never tend to punish each other when we trade any parts. Sometimes it's a hard decision that we give each other parts because we like them. But it's more about making those considerations. Like when we're going to play an hour long or an hour and a half long of music, we have to know, where can we give ourselves breaks and balance each other out. Another thing in general that I think we should definitely consider talking about is the process that we've kind of taken on making our sound, and working together to figure out like what changes did I come with, what changes did I need to meet to kind of get our sounds more aligned, and also just the concept of, playing like a classical trumpet player versus a jazz trumpet player. And I'd say for me personally, it came down to really asking you, like, what musicians do you like to listen to? What trumpet players do you like to listen to? Your influences, listening to you play. And then also from the sense of like, when I play second trumpet, I really try to put the focus on like blending and sounding as close as possible. But with the sense of respect that when I'm playing first, I'm trying to sound like myself still, keeping that individuality. So that's one of the things. I would also say another thing that I think is really important that I spoke of earlier is articulation. There are some times where articulations won't be written in music, and you have to make a call. And some people hear it one way and another person hears it another. And that doesn't mean one person's interpretation is right or wrong. It's not very black or white. It's more of the call of like who's leading, who's the primary voice. And most times when you're playing second trumpet, it is the first trumpet that's playing the top voice, or they are playing the melody or something that's more important. You're supposed to be supporting that. So I tend to listen to the person above for these calls. And I think, Dillon, you would agree. You tend to do the same. I feel like when I'm playing first trumpet, you're just ears open for whatever's handed to you. And then I think we have good communication that if there's ever a conflict of the music, if we ever feel like, well, you're playing this really staccato, but this is like one of the most legato pieces we've ever played, why would you randomly be playing staccato here? It's not about us bickering with each other's decisions. It's about discussing what's better for the music. And I think we really put that priority forward. Are there any things that you consider that are really important for the different roles to focus on?
Well, I think you kind of started off talking about what you would change to match a certain classical sound, and I think the flip side of that is the classical player matching a more schooled, experienced jazz sound. One of the things is getting the tongue out of the way, tonguing less hard. Well, depending on what you're doing, but that's usually kind of the rookie mistake that we make as classical players. And just learning to find the pocket is another really big thing, and that's also I've gotten a lot of listening recommendations from Lewis, so that definitely helps. And hearing it up close.
I know you specifically feel a certain way about octaves when it comes to a first and a second trumpet player. Did you want to touch on that at all?
Well, I think in general, this is a good rule also for pretty much any situation you're playing in, is that if you are playing second and you notice that you're in unison with the first player, you want to back off. And you basically want to never play loud enough where you can't hear them. You want to hear more of the person you're in unison with than yourself. And the flip side of that is if you're playing the octave below, you want to maybe objectively play at a higher decibel level even, just to make sure that that really strong fundamental is there. It'll make it easier for them. They won't have to push as hard to generate the sound.
Yeah, and I think that goes along with the sense of our communication. There's no scenario where you're going to be a mind reader. I think you definitely learn tendencies of the person you play with, but there will be scenarios where Dillon will tell me, hey, man, could you please play louder in this section? Or, hey, man, can you check the intonation in this one section? And, we work to support each other, regardless of what it is. If somebody has an opinion that they need to bring up, we entertain it. That's really what we're supposed to do. We need to make sure that we see through all of the opinions of the group in general, but specifically between his and I, our synergy. That's important for making the trumpet section work. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to discuss with Cortina Brass, myself, Louis Ozoria, our other trumpet player, Dillon Parker. I hope you've taken some of our advice and you can apply this to your music making for the better.